Second speaker of this session is Dr. Sunil Kumar Onteru. It is a pleasure for me to introduce him. He did his PhD in animal biochemistry from the National Dairy Research Institute at Cornell in 2007. He did his postdoctoral research in molecular genetics from Iowa State University at the United States till 2012. Currently, he is working as a senior scientist in animal biochemistry division of NDRI Cornell. So he will be speaking now on the topic life and its origin. He will speak from the chemical and Vedantic perspectives. Dr. Sunil, please.
A very good morning to all here present. This is a great opportunity for me to speak on this particular topic, that is life and its origin, chemical and Vedantic perspectives. According to the New Scientist magazine, there are top 10 unanswered questions in biology, especially in science. So these are, if you see this, the top question itself, that is, how did life begin? And next, there are so many questions, but if you see another question, that is, what is life? So basically, there are two major intricate questions which are unanswered in science. Those are origin of life and also what is life. So let us try to answer these questions in different perspectives, and for that first we will go to the molecular concepts of life. By seeing these molecular concepts of life, we can make further questions and try to answer those questions. These further questions are, is the chemical evolution life, is the DNA molecule life, or is the genomics life, or is the RNA molecule life? Let us see these things one by one. The basic assumptions in chemical evolutions of life, there are the three major assumptions. The first assumption is the hypothetical primitive atmosphere must have been either reducing or neutral environment. That means at that stage there may not be any oxygen at that environment. So in that environment, simple molecules like amino acids, purines, pyrimidines, they are the simple biomolecules that those things might have synthesized first under the influence of this ultraviolet radiation, electrical discharges, radioactivity, thermal energy, and so on. Later, these simple molecules, they coalesce together and form big biomolecules, and then finally the cells. These biomolecules may be like protoproteins, protonucleic acids, and other protocellular components that results into the formation of cells. So these are the three major assumptions in chemical evolution of life, and these assumptions were supported by very seminal classical experiment by Urey Miller, and who synthesized this amino acids from the mixture of ammonia and also methane, hydrogen, and water at 80 degrees centigrade by using water vapor and also some electrodes to simulate the sparkling. So by this we can assume that yes, the molecules can be synthesized in this reducing environment. But what is the other scientific facts, whether at that environment can you see really a reducing environment, or whether oxygen is present at that particular location of on the earth? Some of the evidences says from geology, geophysics, and geochemistry that there was no evidence for that kind of reducing atmosphere. For example, this is irradiating highly reducing atmosphere. They generally needs to produce some hydrophobic organic molecules. I think last 2 days back, another professor explained that there were some hydrophobic molecules at that time, but the earliest rocks did not show that kind of evidence. Similarly, the theoretical calculation of that is indicated that the dissociation of water vapor might have happened by this ultraviolet radiation that might have released enough oxygen in the history of Earth to create an oxidizing atmosphere rather than the reducing atmosphere. So, this kind of fact can be realized by Stanley Miller himself in one of his talks. He says that we really do not know what the Earth was like 3 or 4 billion years ago. So, there are all sorts of theories and speculations. The major uncertainty concerns what the atmosphere was like. This is a major area of dispute. So, under the assumption of reducing atmosphere, the amino acids were synthesized at that particular experiment, and also that supports the chemical evolution, but still it is under the dispute. Okay, let us think that anyhow somehow the molecules might have synthesized, and that may be forming, or that might have formed this particular DNA molecule, which is a hereditary information molecule from different cells. So, then is the DNA is life. So, but there is a lot of gap between the DNA and the cellular function also, because even though the technology is advancing and lot of genomics and systems biology, but still we cannot find out exactly how these two are connected by holistically. So, there is a lot of gap between the DNA and complete functioning of cell. Why it is like that? Our science generally currently we assume that the cell is also showing its function based on the pull and push laws. So, this is our thinking about the cellular function is only a particular area rather than the outside the box. So, the cellular function may not be only by the push and pull laws like machine learning languages or machine. It is not like a machine, and there will be other laws that are beyond this modern chemistry. So, currently with the available experimental knowledge and also available technologies, we can synthesize all the molecules in laboratory like DNA, proteins, amino acids, everything we can synthesize, whatever the known biomolecules in lab. But even though, can we synthesize a synthetic living cell in a test tube by using all these biomolecules? But it is not possible. Why? Even DNA molecule, once it's come out of the cell, once we isolate DNA in the laboratory and kept in a particular test tube, it is not a life, it is a lifeless molecule. Similarly, any biomolecule like protein, sugar or anything is a lifeless molecule once we isolate them back into in laboratory and in vitro conditions. So, this can be seen in a statement of another famous Nobel laureate in chemistry, and he was telling like this: in my search for the secret of life, I ended up with atoms and electrons which have no life at all. Somewhere along the line, life has run out through my fingers. So, in my old days, I am now retracting my steps. So, that was the realization of a scientist after working long years, and still he is also telling that, he was telling that life is not just biomolecules. And okay, then let us consider the DNA was synthesized. We assume that okay, the DNA have so many genes, and entire genes together that may make a life. But is it possible? But it is not. So, the genome is also not a life actually, but let us see that. Is the genome life? The human genome was completed in 2003, but we know all that in our body we have nearly 20,000 genes, and but still can we explain or can we answer the question, what is life? We can't answer the question. You can see this very clearly here. Even identical genomes, the twins, who has identical twins, but they may have different personality, but it is not, even though they have their genome is same. There will be some epigenetic changes according to environment, that is a different story, but their personalities are different. So, in the last 50 years, we have filled in huge details about living systems and can manipulate their body structures in many astonishing ways, but we still do not know what the life is. So, day before yesterday somebody was telling that we can even transplant the heart, but we cannot transform the heart. So, we can synthesize even heart also, but we cannot do transform that. So, in the molecular evolution, people think that there is a RNA world. So, RNA is the molecule which is the major origin of the life rather than other DNA molecule. Why? Because RNA molecule has a property called as self-replicating, and also it has enzymatic activities. So, any reaction, biochemical reaction takes place by means of enzymes. So, both the properties, replication and enzymatic properties, were present in case of RNA molecule. So, people thought that RNA would have been erased first and then DNA and proteins they have added later. So, then because DNA could be the stable molecule containing double strands in its structure, so then later on DNA could have, has taken over the function of RNA role and become the guardian of heredity molecule. Let us see whether it is possible at that prehistoric age of Earth. If you see the structure of RNA molecule, the RNA contains the ribose in its structure, it is a sugar molecule. So, this ribose is difficult, it is very difficult to create such this ribose at the hypothetical early Earth conditions, except in very few small quantities. And even those small quantities that are ribose is not stable at that environment. If you see the statement of Stanley Miller, he says that ribose and other sugars have surprisingly short half-lives for decomposition at neutral pH, making it very unlikely that sugars were available as prebiotic reagents. So, this statement was again supported by Francis Crick, and in his another statement he says that at present there was a big gap, the gap from the primal soup to the first RNA system capable of natural selection looks forbiddingly wide. So, this was the background of chemical evolution or molecular evolution and everything. Okay, even though we have all the molecules and ready that now let us go and cell will be formed, can we think that all biomolecules are the life? So, again this is given by this Werner Arber, that he says that he is a famous molecular biologist basically, and he is a Nobel laureate in physiology and medicine also. He was telling that although as a biologist, I must confess that I do not understand how life came about. To me, autoreplication of a macromolecule does not represent life. Even a viral particle is not a live organism, it can only participate in the life processes. So, life could be beyond the assembly of a bag of molecules. So, this life could be beyond the assembly of bag of molecules. This can be visualized by a glimpse of some of the mystical facts of life. If you see this,
4 minutes.
Okay. So, what are the molecular operations that are responsible for doing this kind of activity? Suppose when we are enjoying the music and symphony and everything, so what is making us to be happy in that way? Similarly, when we see our close friend also, what is the molecular operation that can explain those kind of things? So, if you see the mother's love also, which molecular mechanism in any animal that explains the mother's love? See this squirrel, it can jump with very precise timing or perfect timing and accuracy from one tree to another tree. So, what physics it studied that we do not know. Similarly, if you see the cuckoo, who tells to cuckoo to lay eggs in the crow's nest? Which molecular mechanism explains this? So, the life is beyond the molecules, it cannot explain molecules cannot explain each and every life processes. So, even in spite of those things, even we believe that chemical evolution is the major thing, it has lot of implications on our life. These implications can be seen from the life of Charles Darwin himself. You see this, but now for many years I can't endure to read a line of poetry. I have tried lately to read Shakespeare and found it so intolerably dull that it nauseated me. I have also almost lost my taste for pictures or music. The loss of these tastes is a loss of happiness and may possibly be injurious to intellect and more probably to the moral character by enfeebling the emotional part of our nature. So, when we are behind only the material things, obviously, or the chemical evolutions and all those things, we may lose that emotional part as well. So, what are the laws that are beyond this material nature that will help to understand the life? Generally, most of the scientific practices or theories, they are based upon the relative descriptions. In many experiments, we keep control and experimental. It's all relative. But the goal of real science is to understand or seek out the ultimate principles of underlying reality. So, everything from past 200 years, we think that all these science we can keep in the mathematical formulas. But is it possible? Let us see the functions of cells. In every cell, we have nearly 200 trillion molecules, and these molecules, they work in a coordinated manner, and every reaction occurs in a precise timing and have function. So, what makes a living cell perform all these seemingly purposeful chemical reactions, and which chemical theory or mathematical problem that can explain these molecular level in a dynamic manner, and what is the wave function that can explain such a phenomena? So, as per Vedantic paradigm that material science cannot explain, even systems biology also cannot explain that. So, as per Vedantic paradigm, the ultimate cause of all the phenomenon, including life, is the absolute truth, which have certain features. So, what are those features? The absolute truth exists, but it is not fully conceivable to human mind. Both the material science and Vedanta accepts this. So, it exists invariably throughout the space. The both school of thoughts, they accept this. It does not change with time. So, absolute truth does not change with time. So, both schools accept. It controls and is the source of all manifestations. The Vedanta accepts straightly, but material science also accepts with some clause. So, it exists as a unified whole. That material science does not accept this, but Vedanta accepts this. It possesses the attribute of consciousness, that is also accepted by Vedanta, but not material science. It corresponds to the fixed mathematical expression. This cannot be accepted by Vedanta, but material science considers it. And the perception of absolute truth is limited to matter and material energy only. This was the view of material science, but Vedanta does not accept this. So, with that, the consciousness is the fundamental feature of the absolute truth, and all the basic laws and principles of nature are seen to be integrated into harmonious whole within the awareness of absolute consciousness. Such absolute truth exists as one unified sentient being, which appears to be lie outside the realm of experimental observation. So, the higher order of laws are psychological in nature, they do not fit sensibly in the mathematical framework. So, according to the Vedanta, this absolute truth or conscious being is the source for both the material, inferior material energy and the superior spiritual energy. The material energy consists of subtle elements like mind, intelligence, false ego, and gross elements like earth, water, fire, and air and ether, and superior energy that consists of spiriton or soul, which has the three important properties. Those are the full of eternity, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. So, according to Vedanta also, the unmanifested primordial matter or sum of total material elements was in the form of pradhan, and it was expressed in the form of Mahatattva in the manifestation cosmic universe. From Mahatattva, the subtle energies like Sattva, Rajama, and also Tamas, they are goodness, passion, and ignorance came into the picture, and from there all the gross material manifestations happen. So, our science deals with mainly matter, but not with life. So, what is the life then? The life is a spiriton is the fundamental spiritual particle of life, and it is a quantum of life. It exists in unlimited numbers, cannot be created or destroyed, and possesses the property of consciousness and free will, and it also has personality. So, this true science is beyond the realm of material science. So, biology basically deals with the interaction of the spiriton and the matter, and modern science believes that spiriton is an emergent product of evolution of matter, but it is actually other way around, so which is not correct as per the Vedanta. So, as in the Vedantic standpoint, the living being is a genome, mind, intelligence and false ego and spiriton or soul. The genome is considered as basically body, that is a physical body, and also subtle matter and spiritual life particle. So, this body is controlled by senses, and senses are controlled by mind, and mind is controlled by intelligence, intelligence is controlled by consciousness. And the overall by this we could understand that the superior spiritual energy makes the inferior energy to appear as living, and this because of that the living life has two other properties, that is the consciousness and free will, and because of this consciousness and free will, the life gets some certain qualities like its tolerance, honesty, love, sacrifice, humility, self-control and responsibility. And with those qualities, the aim of life is to achieve the natural state of soul, or to achieve these three properties, and this can be done by the process of self-realization. And by this, based on the consciousness, even Vedanta also has a kind of evolutionary model, that is the lower consciousness is present in case of trees and plants, that is called as covered consciousness. The worms, insects and other animals, they have shrunken consciousness, and human beings we have budding consciousness. People who are inquiring about absolute truth, they have bloomed consciousness, and self-realized souls, they have fully bloomed consciousness. With that, the life is coming from life, that is a spiriton only, it emerged from the big soul, and spiriton is the non-material spiritual particle which makes these matters alive. Consciousness and free will, these are the fundamental properties of spiritual particle. So, the aim of life is path of self-realization, or to come to the stage of Satchit and Anand, or to achieve the stage of happiness. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions?
Any question?
You have explained that body is controlled by mind, mind is controlled by intelligence, then intelligence is controlled by soul.
Consciousness, yes, soul.
The soul is controlled by anything, or any soul is under the anything?
Sir, the soul is created by
individual.
super soul, right? So, all souls are controlled by super souls. So, obviously, yes.
Any scientific, how we can think?
Vedanta itself is a scientific treatise. It's a great
We are
literature.
explaining both, no? So how we can prove it? So souls are controlled by something.
Yes, soul contains two properties, that's what I said, consciousness and free will. According to the free will, it will go also.
Sir, I am a teacher. If I am a teacher, I am teaching in the class. The topic is origin of life.
Okay.
So, how can I teach that? What is the actual
Origin
truth of origin of life?
Sir, as per Vedanta, it was created by God. That's the truth. The reason is, we can consider, why can't we consider Vedanta itself is a scientific thing? It's also like leisure paper. They are also non-material scientists who compile this.
Let me just make one comment. First of all, congratulations on a
Thank you, sir.
fantastic review and in reductionist science and the metaphysical interpretation of life. A few comments I have. I mean, you talked about the Urey-Miller experiment and so on, and said that the organic molecules, the amino acids and so on, are a very far cry from life, which is something that I endorse 100%. But the essence of life, really, in terms of chemistry, is the information content of all the macromolecules that are involved in a living cell, right? And to this day, every attempt that has been made to synthesize life, even the most primitive life, from non-life has been a dismal failure, right? But I think the empirical, experimental test of whether what you're saying in terms of spirituality and the universality of life is correct or not depends on one single experiment. And that experiment is to show that life is everywhere in the universe. And without a doubt that this has to be shown to be the case, that life is a truly cosmic phenomenon. And I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we have come very close to establishing that as a fact. We have evidence both from biology on the Earth and also from experiments that have been done in the stratosphere, in comets and so on, that life, at least in the solar vicinity, in the vicinity of our planet, is everywhere. Life in a very primitive form is everywhere. And if life of a primitive kind is everywhere, then I have to assume that advanced life leading up to the highest levels that you talked about of cognizance and intelligence and so on, that life is also a universal, a cosmic phenomenon. You cannot have the simple components of life without having the convergent property of life showing up in very, very many places. So I think that is something that maybe you should add in your next talk, that there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that life is a truly cosmic phenomenon, empirically testable and testable even here and now.
Yes.
And that would establish the connection really beyond a shadow of doubt, the connection between the highest levels of intelligence that you talked about, the highest levels of cognizance and knowledge and wisdom, and the life that we have here on the earth.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we thank the speaker once again, Dr. Sunil, for his highly illuminating talk.